It is time, so I think we should jump in. We still have attendees trickling in, but I want to make sure we have enough time for as robust and productive discussion as we can. My name is Harrison Harvey. I am the forum coordinator this year, working alongside Anna Sosa, our forum producer. And I want to welcome you to co-productions and international collaboration on day 5 of Forum. We still have 2 more days, so make sure you're tuning in because we have some really wonderful panels still upcoming. So the way that this will work is we'll have about 45 minutes of discussion and then some time dedicated to taking your questions. Please feel free to throw those in the Q&A box. And of course, chime in the chat box if you want to. We have a spectacular lineup today. Our moderators, Rowan-Legg from Screen Anarchy. We have Giulia Caruso, producer, Laura Jumel from Salaud Morisset, Marielle Membreno from Protagonist, and Apoorva Bakshi, another producer. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Shelagh, and I hope you enjoy this wonderful panel. Thank you.
Thank you, Harrison, and welcome everyone. So we're going to chat for about 45 minutes. There is a Q&A box you will see at the bottom of your Zoom screen. You can put in a question at any point, and we'll get to those in the last 15 minutes of the panel. But if you think of something, don't feel you have to wait for that point. Feel free to write it in there and we'll see it. Also, closed captioning is available. That button you'll also find on your bottom bar menu. And feel, we've already got people saying hello in the chat, which is wonderful. Feel free to go into the chat as well. So welcome everyone to talking about co-productions and international collaboration. I think that oftentimes when people think about co-productions, they really only think about feature films. But there's certainly, I think, in this day and age with the certain technologies, advantages to looking into co-productions for your short film. Maybe we could go around to each panelist to just say what they think are the benefits of looking into making your short film a co-production. I'm just going to go with the order in which I sort of see people on my screen. So if we could start with Giulia.
Hi, everybody. Well, thank you for having me. Well, I don't personally have experience doing co-productions for short, so I'm actually very curious about how that works. I think for me, one of the biggest pros of co-productions, kind of regardless of the format or the length of the project, I think it's a potential creative freedom that it gives, creators, filmmakers, directors, and writers. And so I think that, which is also a bit of a downside on the other hand, is when you're trying to sort of force something into like a creative, something that can fit in different countries and different markets potentially. But I think that, if someone has a project that creatively and maybe has a story and has a history that does have that potential, I think that one of the biggest upsides of looking for co-productions, even for a short film, is that you are sort of opening up the world of your film, not only creatively, not only in terms of potential collaborators, but also in terms of the life that it can have, for being seen by people, and in terms of festivals. I think that it does open up the world of the film in many, many ways.
Great, thank you so much. Marielle?
Yeah, I think you answered that really well, Giulia. In terms of, I guess, the creative benefits, I think there are probably also a lot of financial benefits. Again, I'm the same. I don't have so much experience co-producing with shorts, but in terms of feature films and in terms of the area in which I work, which is the UK, there are certainly many benefits financially and otherwise to putting together something, let's say, with a UK co-production with other countries. And that's sometimes that films may, within festivals, be able to qualify for certain awards. There's also obviously the creative benefit of bringing in crew and cast and other kind of creative elements to your project, and as an international co-production. And then obviously for, let's say, the UK in particular, there are a lot of financial benefits. So you get to take advantage of the tax credits here. You get to take advantage of things like the BFI Film Fund. So there are kind of the creative and then the more practical, logistical, financial benefits as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we have to think about both the creative and the practical. Apoorva?
Okay, so, just from a large, I also come from large format productions. I have dabbled in producing shorts, and primarily, just as Giulia and Marielle said, creatively development becomes very, very powerful. If you have script doctors from across the world reading your script and improving it on paper before you go into shoot, just to be able to check on the universal approach of how far it can travel. Artist collaborators, with the pandemic, even large scale productions are collaborating across the globe with the right kind of artists. And sometimes you might have an artist on your wish list, and since you're doing a short, you can reach out to them without the expectation of higher budgets. But if your project is very powerful and they relate to it, sometimes even senior artists would like to encourage you by participating in the creative process, and maybe pro bono as well. So I've been able to pull in a lot of resources for short filmmakers back in India, with consulting services from senior artists across the world. So that's something that can be tapped into. Post-production, like Marielle said, like you have a lot of tax credits across the world, especially in countries like India, where everything is very equity driven. We don't have a lot of government support for the film and TV industry. Countries like Canada, France, European, German, and UK co-productions really come handy in financing a project. And we're still garnering a lot of power for shorts to monetize themselves, which has not really happened in the past decade. In order to reach that level, festival selections, and then just to showcase your piece out there so that you get established as a director or writer happens. Subtitle checks also help a film travel. So just co-producing it with other filmmakers from other nationalities helps check on that. And of course, distribution. Sales agents come on board. There are some specific sales agents across the world who acquire shorts and represent shorts for distribution sales. So that also comes in handy if you are truly co-producing it globally.
Thank you. And let's see, Laura?
No, I completely agree with everything that was said. And of course, the financial part is extremely important in the co-production. And of course, it will bring a lot to the project. I'm producing in France, and we have different dedicated grants that can really support the film. But no, as you know, I think it's also really great for the creative aspect. Also, it can be a bit tricky sometimes when you don't speak the same language, so you have to translate a lot and it can cost more money. But I think it's really great just to have different perspectives on one short film and different international perspectives. And creatively, I think it's really amazing for the film. And yes, and for the distribution, I also think it's quite valuable because you give much more exposure to the film in different countries. So yes, it will just, make the film more seen, and it's always great. Thank you.
Yes, I think from an audience perspective, there's certainly a benefit if you can get subtitles in whatever language you can in order for it to travel a lot more. Unfortunately, right now, English is the dominant language of the world, but I think, there's always advantages to having something subtitled in others if you can put some of your budget towards that. If somebody's got, has an idea, they think, I have this film and I want to make it, in another country, or I want to make a film in another country that's not my own. Where do you think they would start? Does it have to be a creative perspective, from a financial perspective? How would they begin the process of looking into a possible co-production? Like what do they have to, what are the things they have to think about in order to possibly achieve a co-production? Giulia?
Well, that is there is a lot of answers, I guess, to that question. I'm mostly a creative producer. I work mostly in the US. Our most recent film is a feature. It's a co-production between Greece and France, where we brought some equity from the US. So it's a little bit of a puzzle in terms of financing and people involved. But for me, like, I would say that kind of something I mentioned in my first answer too. I think that for me, the creative is always the beginning. I think that there is a way to make things work, when you start, when the story makes sense to live in a certain world, then I think there are ways that you can capitalize on the existing resources, whether it be state funding, whether it be collaborators, post-production, taking post-production to another country. Like, we've looked into a lot of options for different projects that we have, like doing post-production in New Zealand, or, doing something, shooting part of it in another country. And I think all of those things you can make those things work as long as they make sense in the world and the story you're telling. I think what I struggle with, and this happens sometimes with students when I teach, or potential collaborators, is when people are trying to force the sort of international and collaborative aspect between different countries onto something that doesn't naturally have that. And then it becomes very bizarre. And you spend a lot of time kind of trying to make things fit into a certain box, because the truth is that what I'm discovering, and I'm pretty new to the world of co-productions, certainly more new than people who work like in France, for example, or is that, it is very much, especially in Europe, like a system with a lot of boxes. Like, you need to check boxes to sort of make sense, for the co-production to make sense from a financial standpoint and from a producing standpoint. So I would always encourage people to start from like a creative instinct, that where does your story belong? Where do the people you're telling this story about belong? Like, there is this weird things that you see where it's like people speaking English, but the film is shot in a different country, and where people don't speak English on a daily basis. And it's like, to me, that's a huge throw off. I'm like, I don't get it. Like, these people wouldn't be speaking English. Why are we looking at this? So I think that is the sort of like authenticity of the story, and the people is the starting place. And then you can always find, creative solutions on a producing level of like what cast you can bring or what collaborators. At least that's, my approach.
Laura?
I think for me, the first question is, what kind of co-production are you looking for? Is it an artistic co-production, or is it a financial co-production? Do you need more money for the post-production at the end or not? But I would say the best way is to attend festivals and markets, especially if you're looking for a French co-producer. I would say attending Clermont-Ferrand Film Festival is the best way to meet people, to talk about your project. There are more and more festivals that offer pitching sessions where you can meet other production and, raise desire around your film. So I think that's a good way to start.
Marielle?
Yeah, I think starting with the creative is very smart. Again, my perspective, I guess, is of UK co-productions, not always, but or a lot of European co-productions is what Protagonists work on most of all. And I guess, just an example of a project and how it came together as like a kind of a case study is a film we're working on, which is an Icelandic filmmaker who lives and resides in the UK. He has UK producers on the project. The film will be shot in Iceland. The post-production will be done in Ireland. Ireland also funded some of the development. So you can see how there's quite a lot going on in this particular film. The film is going to be in English language, which I know maybe might raise some eyebrows. But the filmmaker, the story that he's telling touches upon aspects which come from Icelandic folklore, and it's a horror project. And so it's set in Iceland, but the characters themselves are not speaking Icelandic. And so again, the cast are going to be from, our lead actress is Australian. We've yet to cast the rest. So there are a lot of different things going on, and the film is going to have a lot of soft money as part of their financing structure. So they're going to have money from Screen Ireland, and they're going to get money from Iceland as well. So it can sometimes feel like there's a lot going on, but there's specific benefits and reasons why all of those pieces came together. But again, at the end of the day, the creative drive was to tell a story specifically rooted in Icelandic myth and folklore. So I think starting with the creative is a really great idea. And then obviously, like Laura said, it depends on what type of co-production it is, and where the film is set, the world of the film, as Giulia was saying as well, because you could take advantage of a country that maybe has geographic landscapes that look similar to the story that you are telling, but isn't exactly the same, and therefore you can take advantage of the crew in that country and HODs there. So yeah, I think it's the creative, and then figuring out exactly what you need out of your co-production. Do you need to take advantage of certain tax credits? Do you need to take advantage of certain regional funds? Yeah.
Great, Anna. Apoorva?
So all of the above, I think it's covered. Like the biggest takeaways is what Giulia said, that don't dumb down your actors in the world, right? Like you need to say an authentic story that travels the furthest with a world that actually is used to watching subtitles or dubs. It kind of really lives up to that expectation of staying authentic to your story narrative, and it's just what would naturally be spoken in the creative side of things. So what Marielle and Laura also said was, let the creative drive the force. I believe in the power of script the most. So the creative should really drive that, and the best artists, collaborators can come together. I feel a lot of permutation and combination. There is no one formula that you would follow for building a co-production strategy for your own script or film. It would be really about adding value and strategic alliances. I just feel like projects fall apart when the reason to co-produce or collaborate is not strategic or adding value, or just for the sake of attaching talent or names. So it's important to stay authentic to the ride and keep experimenting, and like Laura said, go to film festivals and markets for you to be able to build that strategy before indulging in committing to partnerships which might not really be beneficial for the film later. So I have an example of Delhi Crime, which I produced, which is on Netflix. It's a TV show. It's an Indian-Canadian director, a Danish DOP. It's fully post-produced in Canada and UK. And it's the most authentic story coming out of India, right? So it's crime and it's drama, but the writer-director spent 4 years researching the material in India. So the power of the story, and at that time I remember we independently financed it because none of the platforms really wanted it because of the sensitivity of the material. And that's what brings me to one other topic, that sometimes in certain countries, censorship rules really, really do govern and push you into co-producing with outside and other countries, because filmmakers or collaborators or producers across the world have more gumption and guts to take on financing such projects, which then do find distribution in the home country, but without the creative shackles that come while developing it. So if you have a sensitive subject that you want to tackle, which is also one of my latest film, Womb, which is called Women of My Billion, it's about the story of this one girl who walked from the south of India to the north of India fighting violence against women. Now, if you go ahead and watch it, it is very sensitive and the government might have issues with wanting to release it. But I found co-producers in the US and UK to be able to fund it and support it. So a lot of permutation combinations need to be played on. And as a writer-director, I feel like finding the right producer is very key, who's in sync with your creative vision. But you should also be responsible in understanding which partnerships you want to take on, which will not creatively shackle you or later stop the release of the project in certain parts of the world. So maximum reach and strategic alliances is what you should gun for.
Absolutely, that's really true. And there's a lot more short film festivals now that have the industry components, such as Palm Springs, Clermont-Ferrand in Canada. There's Festival Regard. There's a London Short Film Festival. There's lots of places that do offer short filmmakers a platform to get on the industry side. It's sort of the good and the bad of short films, in that there isn't as much commercial opportunity for shorts. They're out there. There are so many more ways for us to watch shorts, which is amazing, but they're not really going to make money the way a feature or a television show does. But the other side of that is you actually can take more risks and can be more creative with the content, because you don't have to worry about it making $1 billion. So as you say, Apoorva, there's so many opportunities. If somebody is looking, I'm sure this question, I've already seen a few of them, is going to come up. Like, if somebody says, okay, I've got this script, I'm in Canada, the film is set in Montenegro, but the main character is someone for Korea. How do I start? Where is the first place I look to start saying, hey, how do I get this? How do I I think this is something that would work as an international co-production. How do I start to make that work, not only creatively, but financially? Apoorva, would you have any ideas?
I feel like grants is the big way to go for shorts, because I just feel equity stake from any producer to bring it on kind of really adds on to the risk. Unless and until you have a very big vision of, building it as a portfolio, and you are already attached to a producer who wants to invest in your journey and your experience. But I feel like grants that are available across the world need to be tapped into first. Also, specific, like you said, a Korean talent required, right? Like, I think Laura's point of going to festivals and traveling and exposing yourself to with filmmakers who've actually indulged in co-productions in the right way, and learning what not to do more primarily than what to do, because what to do are already listed everywhere. A lot of talks depend on how you can navigate the journey. But a lot of co-productions also become very heavy, top heavy, right? Where attachments come for the way of introductions, like producers demand their names to be added to the credit just because they made one introduction here and there. So I would say for financing, tap into grants across the world. It takes time. That's also a little bit of a consideration that you must take, that if there's an urgency, then grant applications and getting it processed and coming through takes a full journey of 1 or 2 years. So for you to have that patience is very crucial. Otherwise, really researching producer names. I feel like our tribe is given less credit, the producer tribe is given less credit for collaborating than we do. We're very open to receiving pitches from young filmmakers, but it's just somehow a notion that it'll take too much time or we'll never respond. So I think cold emailing works. The hustle has to be there. You cannot expect to wait out, receiving response. But building equity partnership is also something you must learn to reduce and tap into soft money, like Marielle said. That's the most crucial way, because producers are able to extend that support, especially for shorts where there's no monetization. But soft money can be something that they can attach themselves if the concept and the script is really strong. So that's the way to go.
It's absolutely true. Producers are the unsung creative heroes of cinema. They don't get enough credit for that side of it. Further to what I was talking about with in terms of how to find the hard or soft money with co-productions. Marielle?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, Apoorva. That was the kind of a perfect answer. I guess from my perspective, obviously the grants and the soft money are ideal. I think the research is going to be a big part of it. If you think that your project is really suited for a co-production in particular country, then do that research and try and find perhaps examples of co-productions between your country and the other country to see how feasible it is. And I think the more you can meet producers and connect and network worldwide, that's going to come in handy. And I guess, you know, the reality of funding a short is it's difficult. It's really tough. Because, you know, it's not often something that people are going to be making a lot of money doing. But the other way, I guess, aside from the grants and the soft funding, is the idea of talent development. So that's another area is, you know, I produced a film at the beginning of the year and we had a gap that we needed filled. So the film was funded primarily through a short scheme, which was fantastic and actually included money for COVID as well. But we still had a gap because the short was actually ended up being a little bit more ambitious than we thought originally. And the way we ended up filling that gap was through a financier who was looking to invest in the filmmaker herself. So she had some feature ideas, which they were interested in. And so putting a little bit of money into her short meant that they could secure a sort of first look deal with her for her feature. And, you know, that's not something that is set in stone. And there is a way for both parties to kind of get out of that arrangement if they needed to. But it was kind of mutually beneficial for us. We were able to get the short made and they were able to you know, secure a potential first look for her feature, which was an idea that they were really interested in. So I don't know how too many other helpful things to add, but that's just the sort of example that I personally, you know, experienced. So something else to think about too is financiers or production companies that are looking to invest in talent.
Great. Laura?
Not sure I have something to add. I think it was really complete.
That's okay. Giulia, would you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think you all said almost, like, I feel like everything that needed to be said. I think my thinking as a producer with shorts, it's a little bit like, how can you minimize resources and maximize outcome? And that I think requires a lot of self-awareness and focus on what are you trying to get out of this film, you know, because shorts, like you all said, it's like there isn't a lot of distribution. A lot of times the shorts that you do see distributed as like maybe a series, you know, on say Netflix or whatever it is, any platforms that are now available, they usually are from, you know, filmmakers that have done a couple, maybe they've done a feature already, like filmmakers that are a little bit further in their career than just maybe having made one or two shorts. So I think really, you know, thinking about what is it that you need to get out of this short, and, you know, how can you make it as small as possible and as effective as possible. You know, I teach in an MFA program, and, you know, a lot of times you see, and I myself was guilty of that when going to film school, is like, you want to put everything into a short, and then next thing you know, it's neither this nor that. So being able to pare things down and focus, like when you say it's like, oh, it's a UK story or Australian story, and with Montenegro and with a Korean, like, you know, then I'm like, why? You know, what is it about that cocktail that is like that you absolutely need to have? Because yes, I mean, it's hard, like you go through grants and it takes so long, or you look for people who are investing in talent, and that also takes a while, I think, to find those right partners. I mean, to have the visibility, to have the portfolio that will attract that kind of investment. So I think really sort of like approaching it in a way that is really focused, then maximizes what it is that is out there, whether it's a grant or, those kind of more equity-based collaborations.
I would just like to add, there's also a lot of brands who have started extending money for shorts, which are not very product driven. It's just the spirit of independence, independent filmmaking and audiovisual mediums. So there are, companies like WeTransfer, Wikipedia, like they are also, they have their own creative wings where you could apply with your script and they would fund your large short films in India. So there are brands who have started doing this as well. So please go ahead and tap into that. There are organizations, non-profits across the world who also, if you have a cause-driven story, you can even tap into that. Some crowdfunding platforms also. So those are smaller pieces that can really come in and provide the support that you need to make the film. And maybe they have a first or a non-exclusive distribution deal. And that's what the beauty of shorts is, that as feature films, you want to recover more money, and with global platforms now, you have a very specific route of distribution. But with shorts, you can still piecemeal and put non-exclusive, distribution tags and make sure that the film reaches wide. So yes, brands also, you must look online that there are some brands who are extending support for short film productions.
I think I just wanted to add something. I think that's very interesting because it's true that a lot more, I think as brands are banking more on their online, campaigns. I mean, that's become sort of the main focus of a lot of advertising campaigns rather than like the print or the traditional advertising. They are investing a lot, and they are investing actually a lot in young talent. I think they're in a way much more open to that. But it kind of also goes back to the question of like, what is it that you want to get? Like, if what you want is creative freedom to tell the story of your heart, I think then partnering with a brand is a little bit, you're working at that point almost with a client, right? I mean, some of them can give a lot of freedom, but at the same time, they're still a brand, and a lot of these places are like big corporations. So I think that is sort of where the self-awareness comes from. Like, I hear a lot from students where they're like, well, I could, get, a brand to finance this, and it becomes sort of like a creative, like artistic branded content, but then they don't understand the implications of that, right? Of like, then you have, WeTransfer or whatever it is that is sort of looking over. And I think that there is something, I'm living this through a project that we did now a few years back, which was a short that we love, and it was super exciting. And we've been wanting to figure out the next, the life of it. And the problem is that the contract that was signed by the director at that time, in order to get that money from kind of a big corporation, had a lot of clauses in it that, of course, protected them, not him. And so next thing you know, a few years later, when you're trying to make that short into a feature or a series or whatever it is that you want to do with it, it becomes really difficult, because then, they have ownership over the character or the, whatever iterations of it. So I think that just to be mindful of that going into those collaborations, like you said before, like who are the right collaborators is super important, because right now the best thing that happens to you may be that WeTransfer finances a short, but then 3 years from now, when someone wants to turn that short into a feature, you may not be able to do it because of that, where that money came from. So just be mindful of the ramifications of money, I guess.
Always, I think legally also equip yourself. Like, I think that's the biggest, accounting wise and legally, make sure that your project is very soundly produced, because the journey of the film doesn't just end with releasing it. It goes way and far beyond it. And like Giulia said, be very, very mindful of doing a strategic partnership. And strategic by its definition means that it adds value to the project till the very end. And you're right, Giulia, just to be able to build owning rights just the rights clause should be something that should be looked at very deeply as well, so that you always prioritize material and your attachment to it as a priority, especially in shorts, because you can build from it.
Yes, I think it's I always advocated for film schools to do more teaching on the business side to writers and especially directors. Unfortunately, it is the nature of the business that it is a business, whether you're making a short or a feature, and you really need to do your homework and put a lot of work into that side of it. It'd be nice if, you could just say, here, I have this great script that I want to direct. But there is, in this day and age, so much homework that needs to be done. What sort of homework, for lack of a better word, do you suggest to anybody if they decide that their script is one that they want to do the co-production route? What steps should they take? We've discussed it smattering about, but if they've got this thing and they say, okay, I found the money, so I'm going to go to a film festival, I'm going to talk to producers, I'm going to find the talent, phrase this another way, if they're going down this road, what are the hiccups that they might find that they encounter in trying to make this film, like things to be aware of, especially. Well, one thing that we haven't talked about is cultural sensitivity, especially if you're coming from a privileged background and you're dealing, either in a country or working with people from a country that is not as privileged as you. Sorry, Laura, you haven't spoken for a while. I don't know if I can throw this first to you, and then we'll move to everyone else.
Yeah, I think first, you have to be aware to who you are talking to. And I don't think you should try to reach out too much producers, but maybe to aim the production company, the potential co-producers that would fit you better, I think, first thing. And no, I would also add that if you approach co-producer, I think you need to be sure of the script you have and to dedicate enough time to the script, I guess, as well, to be confident enough. And that's it.
Marielle?
Yeah, actually, I think Apoorva mentioned this, but the idea of, for example, script editors that are based in international script editors looking at your project could be helpful in this particular situation if we're talking about the cultural sensitivities. So that's probably a big one that I just stole from Apoorva, but I think it's a really, really important one. If you're thinking about your film, I guess more macro that's something that's going to have kind of true global international resonance. I think that making sure you have a very tight script and one that has been kind of assessed from a cultural perspective, I think is definitely very important, just at the script stage, for sure.
Apoorva?
I would say as to students, I think writer-director students should take some producing classes. They should go in and opt in for some specific classes which help them understand the business side of things. And so should producers go into some creative producing exercises so that the relationship that they can have with their potential counterparts later in life really, really helps. Most of us or our generation of producers have been have had that growth curve only on the job, right? And I wish that at film school there was more collaboration beyond just who's just going to put this short film together with me, but by taking classes and gaining more knowledge and talking to people who have actually successfully produced together. So writer directors should definitely not be very hung up on script development based on what their notion of a great traveling script is, but truly indulge in people reading your material and giving you feedback there was a blacklist concept in the US. There are similar, where 6 people read and give you feedback, critical feedback. And then, of course, it's up to you to be able to incorporate it. But the global traveling nature of the emotional totem of your script will happen when you get script doctored, and you have more knowledge about what other struggles of a producer to be able to take your creative vision to home, right? You want to kill a child in a country where it's censored. you don't want to, you can just hint it off. You don't, openly show it. So there are some creative decisions that you might have to tweak to be able to make sure that you don't just get the film made and canned, but are able to release it, make a director's cut, make a producer's cut. Like those are the 2-3, shoot a scene in 2 ways, a specific scene, which might become a pitfall in releasing it. So there are a lot of those things that are not taught in film school and which you should collaborate with, vice versa, producers with writer directors and writer directors with producers by taking classes and attending forums like these, right? Like, I mean, Anna reached out to me. It was a lot of short filmmakers or students don't reach out anymore because you reach a place of having producer credits that they would not hesitate. But these forums are really helpful to attend and understand and learn from. And yeah, Marielle, you did not steal a point. It is exactly what we struggle with and we prep for with all our even feature films and TV series right now. It really applies, amplifies. So if you start learning at this stage with your short, your journey with the film and a series only will get better and easier.
Giulia, would you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, the number one thing that we all need to do, I don't think it's just for shorts or just at the beginning of a career, is research across the board. And I think that means knowing who you're talking to, finding out who is a good fit for you potentially, and not, like Laura was saying, not just reach out to a bunch of people because they produce in France or Germany or whatever it is, but who could actually have a shared sensibility. It means reading co-production agreements between countries which exist and are available and are really long and really boring, but like take the time to actually read those. Because I mean, I have collaborated with producers and I'm like, okay, and I download it and I read this thing and it's never ends and I understand half of it and then I need to go through 7 times to understand the rest. But like a lot of the sort of like ground, not for the US, but for every other country in the world that does co-productions, there is a lot of information available. Sometimes it's hard to understand. Sometimes you need to ask for help to understand it, but do the research and do that work, because that's the work that is free and that you can be doing on your own. You don't need grants or funds for, in order to be able to do that part of the work. And so that's I think, biggest piece of advice, I guess. And that includes also, talking to references of like who has worked with these producers before. What was their experience? Because, a lot of times people get along very well with some people, they don't with other. Maybe there are stories about them. That will not necessarily mean you don't want to work with that person or, put them on a blacklist because of something that happened to someone else, but it will make you aware of where you need to be. Where are the red flags with that person? Is a producer really great applying to funding, but are they awful at script notes? Or are they great at the creative, but they actually are sloppy and don't, they miss deadlines? Like what is everybody's strength? What are people's weaknesses? I mean, nobody's good at everything, right? So knowing going into a relationship, what are the things that you might want to be looking out for, I think is very important. And then I think, for the sort of like cultural sensibility, I think taking the time to immerse yourself in the world that you are trying to portray, like you were saying, Apoorva, with, spending 4 years really for a deadly crime, like understanding how that world means and being humble in doing that, not going in assuming you know anything about things is what actually will, I think people on the other side of that usually, I think, appreciate that, you know, sort of like earnest and humble approach where you're, you know, want to learn. That's at least, I think, my experience having worked in different communities across the world.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sensitivity wise, right? Like just adding to that, the effort that you take, sometimes the population of the own country, like as Indians, we are very desensitized to a certain set of violence that is perpetuated because we hear about it day in and day out. But the approach that Richie took with Delhi crime was to be able to share it as is, and it was a big revelation for our population as well. Where we suddenly started humanizing the police officer. So if you ever get a time to watch the show, it really, you relate to it worldwide because you see the similar tropes existing in your own regions as well. But it is the sensitivity that gets heightened and travels. So yeah.
It's so important, I think, both from like a creative script perspective, but you know, if say you're doing post-production in a country that's not your own, you know, especially if you're going to physically be there or in contact, you really have to be aware of what is this place, what is their practice, what is their film tradition and how they operate. It is a lot of work. It isn't just writing the script and doing storyboarding. There's so much more to being, you know, the creative force behind a film, whether it be short or feature or a television series. That's a lot of work, but I mean, I think that work is very rewarding. As somebody who is Canadian, shot a film in the UK and then post-production in the United States, it's, you know, there's wonderful creative, you know, possibilities and in technical possibilities and relationships. You just have to be aware, especially if you come from a more privileged background. Well, that's great. I think we're going to move to the audience questions. I think we've got several here. So I'm just going to open the Q&A and read these out loud in the order in which I see them on my screen here. From an anonymous attendee. Hello, jumping off Marielle's example. I'm not sure what that is now. I currently live in Israel because I studied film there, but I was born and raised in Italy from immigrant parents. I have a script idea that just relates to the world of Italy as I grew up there. Excluding attending festivals, is there any advice on that territory? I assume, yeah, the territory of Italy, and how to construct, how to conduct research on that matter? That might be an answer to something for Giulia, I'm guessing. Probably, yeah.
Yeah. And not because I have a lot of answers, but because I have been asking the same questions. I'm Italian. I grew up in Italy and I've been living in the US for like 12 years now, but have recently spent time in Italy and have been wanting always to sort of eventually tell more Italian stories and make projects there. So Italy is a very interesting country in terms of their co-productions. I think my biggest recommendation to you would be to pick up the phone and actually call the me-backed, find, you know, which number is the right number to call. Their website is quite awful and a lot of the information is buried, so it's really hard to find the right information for Italian funding. So I would encourage you to pick up the phone and, you know, or send a couple emails and find who's the right person to talk to and have a phone call with them to ask sort of like specific questions, maybe give them context on your project and ask what resources may be available specifically for your for what you're dealing with. Because it's not easy access to information, but there is actually good funding in Italy, and they are, I think, as of this year, investing more into minority co-productions. So where Italy is the minority country, that's at least what I heard recently. And so I think that, you know, there is a lot of resources. It's just that it's really hard to access them. So picking up the phone has been for me the best way to actually get answers on some stuff that I couldn't find anywhere else.
I think it can often vary from country to country how easy or difficult it is to get a lot of information. Next question, and everyone who's typing in questions, please forgive me if I pronounce your names incorrectly. Nikhil has a message specifically for Apoorva. He or she or they would like to know if there are any indie film level collaborations possible with Indian American filmmakers and the best ways to network that. He, she, or they is aware there are no treaties, I guess, between India and the United States that offer any benefits for that.
Okay, hi, Nikhil. You're right. There are not many treaties that really tap into that, but I would say minority programs have kickstarted across the world in order to support specific Asian talent, or the Film Freeway offers a full database of grants that you can tap into. And again, it's really specific to your storyline, which then if you can adapt and narrow down the right kind of partnerships that will assist you to make your independent. But like the forums like this, like I'll post my email right now on the forum, and you can reach out just to be able to guide you through the process of where you are and what could be a potential route of the way forward for your own short. But I would say tap into resources with Film Freeway, where you have a database of minority-led projects, support for the minority-led projects. If you are specifically wanting to tell an Indian story, which is based outside of the country. So, or if you want to go back. So yeah, treaties, like I said, and Giulia also mentioned that it takes time to get a grant rolled out to you, but it might be easier for you to get crowdfund 10 key financiers who have really no expectation of return, but to invest in you as a talent, or your story as a piece that they would like to attach themselves with. So, or a first in last, like last in first out model. It really depends on what you want to what story you want to tell. So start creatively and research. I cannot emphasize the big word that is research, which will get you further away as a filmmaker.
It's very true. It's being a student pretty much forever. If you have that, if you learn how to research stuff in your student days, that carries you through this sort of work. From Petrus, I think this is a general question, if so anyone can answer. In regards to tax credits and benefits, are there countries or regions that offer this for shorts? In South Africa, I guess where this person is, they offer it for long form content, but not for short. I know this is an issue both with hard and soft money for a lot of countries. For example, I know in Canada, depending on the region, you can get a lot of tax credits, yes, with features, because they know that's big studios often, I live in Montreal, and a lot of the Marvel movies shot here. So of course they get so many tax credits because they're employing crew, huge amounts of crew that live here. So that's beneficial to the economy. But as for shorts, that might be a little bit more difficult, if anyone has an answer for that.
Not really. I think I'm not aware of how tax credits work for short, but I think one thing to consider is, in my experience, tax credit are quite a lot of work in order to not only get it, but then do the accounting for it and actually get the money back. Like it's, the process of tax credit is not an easy, straightforward one. And I feel like for a short, I mean, depending on the budget of your short, but it may be more trouble than it's worth. Of course, it depends on a case-to-case basis. But I feel like maybe for shorts, a good way to think about it is like looking for in-kind resources. And that could be like camera grants, or like, say you're traveling somewhere, you're shooting on location. Like, is there a film commission? Is there a regional film commission that can help with accommodations, or, that kind of like very hands-on practical stuff? Is there someone who, I think thinking in more tangible ways would be my approach to a short. I do know in the US, there are companies that when someone, if you know someone who works for certain companies that are sort of like big corporations, they will match an investment into a short, and that is sort of like a tax write-off. But I haven't personally done it, so I don't know exactly the mechanics of that. But that's sort of like a kind of a tax thing that you can do.
Yeah, I guess my experience is mostly in the UK, and in the UK you can get, I think, up to 20% for a tax relief for short films in the UK, and that's has to satisfy certain things. So that has to be, the majority has to be from a UK limited company. It has to pass the BFI's cultural test. So that includes a lot of different things, and it's a points-based system. And all of this you can find online, so you can find exactly what you would need to satisfy. So it could be that the original source material or IP is from the UK. It can be the writer, the director, the producer, crew. That's another category. It can be something that champions diversity within the UK. That's one of the cultural material requirements. So I think whatever country you're looking at, you just need to, again, do that research, because it will be all available online. And for the UK and specifically, you can see exactly how you might meet those requirements for the film, and exactly what percent you need to spend on production in the UK to satisfy that. So yeah, it's the same as features, just research, I would say.
Yes, I feel like it's a case-by-case basis, check where you're planning on filming, for example, as Giulia said, with maybe there's a region with, hotel will give you discount, a restaurant will give you discount. It does, so many regions now do have film commissions specifically for this reason. And especially if it's a smaller one, they might, never hurts to ask, even if you're a short film, what can they help you with, what can then, you can give them in kind, like a credit, something in the credits at the end, for example. So we have a question from Mark. Let's say as a director, I have produced and directed a short, built a Bible with an accurate vision for a feature film adapted from a French best-selling book ready to be presented. As a producer, are you ready to follow? And my question is more, what more would you need to follow me, I assume, to work on this project and negotiate with the author and start the process of a co-production? So if they're, I guess, they're not in France, but they've developed from a source material that isn't of their country, how do you work with an author there? It's not directed at anyone specific, so if anyone has an answer for that. I'm not familiar so much with adaptations of literary sources.
Yeah, I think that's I'll just take a little portion of this, and maybe Laura can shine light on this more. But I think to be able to adapt a story, which is from an author, and to go ahead and write it and develop it, it's a little bit of a risk. Because you should definitely check with rights management, at least it's an online resource, in order to make sure that the adaptation rights are already not with somebody else. Because then you're infringing on authorship work of somebody who has the rights. So I would say approach the rights management of the author in advance to developing it fully, and then ensuring that you have a producing partner in the country itself who could negotiate on your behalf. So that's the first strategic partnership that you would bring on, to be able to make sure that the authenticity of your message gets translated, and it's not coming from a place of privilege, but it's coming from a place of request to be able to want to collaborate. And sometimes language becomes a very big deterrent. So that's why, tie up with somebody a producer who can carry forward your message well, and secure the option for you to play with. So it's almost like then you deal into studying book options and how you structure it with a option price and a floor price. So that's my input, and then go into whatever we discuss for co-production grants and build up.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the world of development is just so much IP based. I mean, definitely in the US, but I'm seeing that more and more worldwide. It's so IP based that I think for everybody who wants to adapt something, the first thing you need to do before you spend a lot of your time and energy and blood and tears into adapting something is to pick up the phone and call the agent and ask if the rights are available to whatever it is that you want to adapt. Because you may end up, I read a book and, it's happened a couple of times recently that I was very excited about the book and I called friends and I was like, oh, do you know anything about this? And it's like, oh yeah, it's like this big studio has the rights already. And, that is becoming more and more common, I think, because a lot of studios or a lot of international platforms are just scooping up rights for things that they may or may not end up developing. But for the time being, they have the option. So you end up wasting a lot of time and energy into something that from a legal standpoint is never going to go anywhere. Nobody's going to, come on board if it's tied to, a very specific underlying material. So definitely do that little step before you put a lot of time and energy into it.
Definitely. Again, do your homework, do your research on that. And we have one last question here. It's 2 parts, so hopefully we can get to both. Well, I'll start with the first part. Questions regarding features. How early in the creative process should you start involving an international collaborator if you want to shoot it in your own country, but have several aspects in the story which is international and would require talent from another country and international distribution? So bringing talent from outside your country into your own, how soon do you start that process? This is for anyone.
I think when you feel, my instinct would be when you feel good enough about your creative that actually you can start engaging with talent. Otherwise, you end up with another producer who has opinions on the script, but that doesn't have an actionable thing to do with it. So I think when you feel very good about the script and think, you and your local producer from your home country feel good about it, then you bring on someone else, giving them clarity on what it is that you want from them and being close to a point where they can actually take the script and send it to talent or whatever it is that you want them to do.
Yeah, and I think it's never too early to start exploring those collaborators and meeting with potential collaborators. That can start and should start as early as possible to find the right partner. So yeah, just wanted to add that as well.
And the final part of the question here, and should you let a producer in your own country look for international collaborators, or can you look for them yourself as a writer-director? For example, if you're visiting a festival with the short or something like that. I would think everybody, all hands on deck, myself, but open to.
Yes, I also agree with the whole all hands on deck approach. It's a baby. Firstly your baby, and then people come and adopt it. And to Marielle's point, it's never too early. But I would also say take your time. Like Giulia said, take your time exploring. Let it stay with them. See how much hustle's coming from the other side as well. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to get stuck in a pipeline with producers who have too many projects to helm. And so sometimes you rather go with the degree of hustle that you have and correlate on that with the producing partners you want to bring on board. So maybe you reach out to 10, but then you will start seeing the interest narrows down to 3 or 4, and then be selective about who you want to partner with. And yes, please don't entirely rely on the producing partner or your local producing partner, because it is a lot of work. And unless and until you also know the struggles of the making and this learning curve can be very beneficial to you as a writer director yourself. So it's not just the producer's role, it's the entire crew's role to be able to come together to make a compelling project happen.
Yeah, I think my advice on that would be to be open and communicate, like, of course, it's all hands on deck. And as long as everybody has the same goal in sight, then everybody's moving forward towards that. I think the problems arise when, you know, you don't tell your local producer that you're going to look for a co-producer, and then you come back from a festival and you're like, oh, we have a co-producer from Iceland, and they're like, we are doing a co-production with another country. And, you know, like, don't assume that you understand everything that's going on in your producer's plans. So both ways, I think, as a producer and as a director, just be open and communicate clearly so that you can maximize everybody's efforts, and not just do things that are sort of like, you know, spots that don't lead to anything because they're not going in the same direction. That would be my sort of advice on that.
And not only in the start, I would say till the end, because distribution becomes a very big problem as well. I've seen such great films just getting shelved because the producing gang does not come together to distribute the film in a collective, you know, single approach way. So it's very important to have clear communication, as Giulia pointed out, through the journey of the project between everybody coming in and adding value.
It's very true. Thank you, everyone. We've learned so much today about the possibilities of co-productions. Grants are out there, the money, you know, credits are out there. I think the best thing we've taken away from this is do your research, be as prepared as possible, and reach out to those who you want to work with.
Thank you, everybody, so much. We hope you will join us for the last 2 days of forum, tomorrow and Monday. Thank you to our incredible panelists. Thank you, Shelagh, for your great moderating. And I hope everybody has a wonderful Saturday.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.